Welcome to This Prepared Life podcast, where homesteading and the apocalypse meet. I'm Allison, your host. Hi, welcome to This Prepared Life. I'm Allison, your host, and I am so excited to have a guest on for you today. Des is someone I have just come to adore online. We have never met in person, but I hope to one day do that. Des is a parent with a young child. She's a full-time employee and a full-time student. And if she can find the time to prep, anyone can. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast, Des.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I am really excited to just hear your journey and your story today. Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, where you live?
Yeah, my family and I, we live in Northern California. I spent the most time in my adult life in the Bay Area, and we'd recently relocated out of the Bay. So it's a little bit different. It was the right move for us as a family. I live with my husband and my toddler, who is going to be 3 very soon. I can't believe how fast time flies. And then I also have a stepdaughter who is in college, so it's a big gap between my kids. Um, but yeah, we are really just kind of taking every step to just be more prepared and, as self-sustaining as possible.
Tell us a bit about your prepping journey. Like, what does that look like? How long have you been prepping? What are you prepping for?
Oh man, there's the list of things that anyone can say they're prepping for is vast, and it's really subjective too. So, I live in if I didn't say it earlier, I'm sorry. I live in a suburban area, so it's very cookie cutter homes, starter homes. So I don't have vast amounts of land, even though that's the dream. That's just not a reality for my family. So, we relocated to a suburban area, and the around 2017, in our area there was heavy rains one year, and just although we're far from the river and the levee in our immediate area, there was really the concern that the rains and the flooding would really break the levee, and it would actually overflow into some of the other neighboring groups of homes and completely flood them. And so I was not even in my prepping journey at the time. I just moved into our house. I'm just trying to figure out like how to paint, what to paint my walls, and then natural disasters like this are kind of around us. And my husband and I, we didn't have kids. We didn't have our child. We had my stepdaughter, but we realized we were not prepared at all. Like if we suddenly had to flee, we had nothing. We had like maybe a
Mm.
fourth of a tank of gas at that. So we just really realized that if an emergency strikes, even if we had ample time to react, we just wouldn't have the things necessary to really be ready, or even start a fire, or even have a change of clothes in the car. So that kind of prompted us to really look into ways to just be more prepared. Little things here and there. It wasn't like this big, let's spend thousands of dollars up front and you know get ready right now. It was really just through the weeks and the months. And I still feel like I'm very junior in this prepping prepping journey. I say that all the time to some of the people I meet online in the prepper community, but it really is a journey. And there's no like fixed point where you're done. I'm prepped. There's no that doesn't exist. So it's this constant forward thinking of, okay, if this situation happens, how would I be prepared? And around us, our most our biggest concern for a disaster is actually grass fire. So, I'm not in a space where we have tornadoes or, earthquakes or immediate flooding. Grass fires probably are our biggest threat where I live, where grass fires, they move fast, but they're able to be extinguished a lot quicker. But that just, I mean, the sheer speed of how fast grass fires can move is really scary, because they can engulf houses, whole neighborhoods in 10 minutes. So it's something we realize we need to be able to be prepped to either hunker down in our home or to flee. Like those are the two things we really need to look at through a lens of how ready are we for these two situations.
I have heard you call yourself a junior prepper, and I sometimes call myself a baby prepper, so I relate to that. um, Tell us how you started prepping. When you talked a little bit about the flooding and that it was just a slow journey.
Mhm.
What did that look like, and where did you gather information, and how did you process that, and just give us more?
This is gonna sound so silly. This is like typical suburban mom. I went to Pinterest. And I was like, "Pinterest, tell me what list I need for a bug out bag." I feel like a lot of people who start this prepping journey, one of the first steps is a bug out bag, right? Because it's one of the first things you're like, "Okay, let's
Mhm.
grab and go." So for me, that really was true. I started with planning bug out bags for my individual family members, and I just found some really like basic cheap backpacks. I'm like, "Okay, this is a bag. I'll fill it with stuff." And so I quickly realized that it is such a subjective, prepping, like, consideration for each family member. You have to really think about, okay, let's say in our minds, if we're separated, like, on trail or something, does everybody have what they need for themselves? And so I realized that the bags that I had were quite small, so I had to upgrade halfway through. But that's kind of the forward thinking process that really just gets started. But for me, I started with bug out bags, and I was able to find a list that I found on Pinterest, and I found a few more lists, and I took a look at what I was missing and things that would be relevant for my family and just continued to build from there. And I really found it so much fun. It was kind of like a treasure hunt, like, okay, what prep items can I find to include in my bug out bag that I don't already have? And then bonus round if I can find them cheap, right? And then I remember I did like a dollar store haul and I was like, this is a gold mine. It just I remember being so excited in a dollar store and they're like, ma'am, are you ready with your cart? So it's it's a you can have a lot of fun with it, I guess is my point.
So you bringing up bug out bags brings up something a little funny that you don't know about. So I don't know if you want me to share this.
Sure.
Um, so you did a reel, I think it recently, where you
Yeah.
were talking about bug out bags, and it was to, I think it was the Little Mermaid, Ursula.
Yes.
Um, and I cracked up laughing, like,
Oh
out
my goodness.
loud laughing. My family thought I was insane when I saw that because just the day before, Kim, the preppy redhead, and I were joking about designating each of the women who prep collaborators with a Disney character.
Oh my gosh.
And then not even 24 hours later, I'm like, "Oh, well, I didn't see her as Ursula, but we're gonna go with this."
Perfect.
So, listeners, if you did not catch Dez's reel, go scroll back through and find it. It is hilarious,
That's so
hilarious.
funny. Thank you.
So you mentioned you live in a suburban area. One of the questions I get a lot, and I'm sure you do too, from women who are just getting into prepping but live in the city or live in a condo is storage.
Mhm.
What does prepping look like for you in your house, in your space, when you do not have, you can't add a container storage unit somewhere. You have to work with what you have.
Yeah, that is my biggest gripe, because there's so many things I wanna do. I mean, I know you and the Preppy Redhead are really big, and you guys actually just had an amazing, IG live about freeze dryer, and I'm like, "Man, I wish I had one, but I wouldn't even know where to put it." So space is absolutely one of the biggest things that I struggle with. I feel like every inch of my home it has been spoken for. And mind you,
Mhm.
I try to find the balance between, okay, where can I put stuff that has a place and its designated spot without it feeling like I have too much stuff. So that's a I feel like that's an anxiety trigger for me. If I just see a pile of stuff, I'm like, must clean, must organize. And so there's that constant battle. But for me, I have found that I really have to take a look at, okay, what are the things that I'm storing? What are the most appropriate places for it? And I'll be honest, like this was actually an awakening I had recently because when I first started storing like canned goods and things like that, I was like, ah, the garage is a good place, right? It's not. My garage gets to like 120. So I'm not really thinking of how I want to store my food long term if I'm just putting it in an appropriate space because the heat will, affect the food that you store. And so I feel like if you are able to simplify your life in many of the things that you keep in your household, like do you need 36 towels? Maybe not. Like maybe you cut that down to what your family needs for towels and then use your linen closet for an additional pantry or an additional layer of food storage. But I think it because I have so little space, like I don't have a basement and I don't have a workable attic. I have like neither. So I'm very jealous when I see you guys post like I'm in my basement. I'm like, oh, must be nice. Um so but I you have to actually really think about what does my family use that I need to keep, because if that frees up space for me, I want to be able to utilize that for other purposes that are important to my family. So you really, and I think you do a great job of really getting this message out there. You need to think about what's important for your family. Like, is the additional bookcase necessary, or could that space be for where your Berkey goes and your spare filters? So um, it forces you to really think about what you do actually purchase for your home and how to maximize space. But for me, I think my biggest one's going to be water. I still haven't quite figured that out about how to store large amounts of water, because for me, it's likely going to have to be in the garage or outdoors. But because it's so sunny and so hot here, that makes it tricky with like algae growth and exposure to the elements. So I gotta think through that. But for me, I can't keep vast amounts of canned goods because when it's heavy, and it's cylindrical in shape, so it's not like they stack perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's tricky. What I have found helps my family the most is being able to purchase freeze dried food. Again, I really wish I had a freeze dryer, but since I don't, my second best option is to find freeze dried foods that fit my family's diet and budget, so that those can store really long term, but in a lot, very flat in some
Yeah.
cases, like they're in bags, or just they're not as heavy because all of that moisture and stuff has been taken out. So freeze dried food for our long term layer has been kind of a good go to for us as we build our additional layers. So long winded answer, but I feel like you can see the 37 tabs open in my brain at any given time. So that's what's going on here. So long-winded answer for your question.
That's awesome. I feel so blessed to have our basement. We did not have a basement in our old house, so our stuff was in our garage. But
Mm.
because we're in Washington, it's not getting hot in there. And it was a garage that was on the bottom half of a daylight basement. So it was half
Oh,
underground. Um, but yeah, I hear you. Storage space is so hard, and I feel so blessed to have the ample space that I
yeah,
do have here. Um, Water storage is so hard for so many people. So I know a lot of women are going to relate to you saying, I just don't know what to do with that.
yeah.
You talked a little bit about your storage and your long-term layer and freeze-dried food. What does your system look like and your layers?
Actually, it's changed in since women who prep really started to take off, beginning of this month, and even a few weeks before that, I realized that the system I had thought I had in place, although it was better than nothing, needed work. And so I was able to really lean on a lot of the women that prep and these different perspectives on how to prepare food, and the idea of this layered approach, right? So your short term, your mid layer, and then your long term. So, what's in your pantry, what can you store for like the next couple months, and then what's like really long term if things get really bad. So I started to really think about the layered approach and how my food preps and my water preps are, and it has really helped my family build out kind of a plan of what we want to do. Because I'll be honest, right now we're seeing crazy prices, we're seeing things out of stock. I mean,
Mhm.
all of those things. So even if I wanted to, I can't just go out and say, like, "Let me spend thousands of dollars and build my layers." I don't think that's economically feasible for any one person. It kinda and also kinda defeats the purpose, unless we have, like, news of any kind of, like, imminent doom. But for most people, I found that they're casual preppers as I am. You get an extra bag of rice here, some extra crayons here, and that all adds up. But through that process, my husband and I are really much more intentional about, like, okay, what can we add to our grocery list today that's going to serve a purpose in our pantry storage, in our mid layer, and possibly our long term. So it's kind of taking what we have and organizing them in a better way so that we're better prepared and we have a good system that incorporates all the good habits we want to do, like, food rotation, and really only buying what you're going to cook. Like, if you don't like artichokes, why are you buying canned artichokes? So
Mhm.
really being intentional about our preps and about our habits and about the things that we purchase, because those habits, they actually bleed into a lot of the other aspects in our life. I found that my husband and I, when we want to make a purchase for something, let's say it's for the house or like some renovation I'm doing around the house, because it never stops. We want to ask ourselves, like, is there a purpose? Like, does this give our family utility? Like, is this something that we should be investing in? When I lived in the Bay, that was not my spending habit. Let me just say that. So it's really helped our family change and be super intentional about where we invest our time, money, and our thoughts. So, again, long-winded answer.
Long-winded is great. It means I am talking less. Um, have mentioned your husband a couple times. Is your husband also a prepper? Is he supportive of you being a prepper? What does that look like in your relationship?
I know you can't see me, but I'm like smiling and laughing to myself, because in most situations, I feel like that I've seen, online and social media, it's very much like both parties are like in, right? And like, let's prep together. That's not us. I am a planner and project manager by trade, so it kind of, and OCD, so it just very much bled into my life of what I want to do as far as the planning aspect of it. And bless my husband for being a very, like, okay, whatever makes you happy, let's do it. But through time, I'm like, oh, I'm so blessed. He didn't fight me any which way, but it did get some questionable looks when I was like, we need a Berkey, and a Berkey. For those who aren't familiar, it's an amazing water filtration system that you can actually use in your home or outdoors. But it's not $10. It's an investment up front. So I think when I started to really be intentional about purchasing things that had, like, multi-purpose and utility that we could use in emergencies, he really started to see the value in that, as my partner through this journey, because and that, I feel like that made this whole thing a lot easier. I can't imagine situations where you're trying to build better self-reliance for your family and your partner's like, no, I want a Ferrari, or
Yeah.
something quite opposite of what your journey is. And I can't say that that was my experience. I'm blessed to have a husband who wants to support me, and it was like a win-win, I guess he would describe. I'm happy and we're doing stuff for our family, so that's cool. So he's been a huge supporter of this, and he'll actually now send me like links to some cool gear. He's like, "Do we have this? Do we need this? This is cool." And I'm like, "Honey, that's a flamethrower. I don't know if we're there yet, but that's cool." So we'll pin that.
Oh, that's so funny. We actually, Joe and I have a slightly similar situation. So we just got a wood stove, and um, he was totally cool through the whole process. And because of the weirdness of our roof of our house, it ended up being a lot more expensive than we thought it would be.
Oh
And
man.
so, he expressed some, maybe we shouldn't do this. And I'm like, here are all of these reasons why I think we need to do this. And he's like, well, maybe we need, for backup heat, maybe we need solar. Let's come up with some other plan. And but
That's so cool.
he went with it. And 2 days ago, he's like, I know I don't say this very often, but thank you for pushing me on this because this was the best investment ever. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Yep, I know."
That's awesome. Just
So
relish in that moment because you're like, "Yes, you see it now."
yeah, because sometimes, like, oh my gosh, the price tag on some things when you're looking through prepper gear or prepper, okay, what am I gonna do if this happens in a long-term scenario? It's not cheap.
Oh, yeah.
And, like you were saying earlier, it does require us to go, okay, am I getting that Ferrari or the wood
Yeah.
stove? I mean, not like they're comparable, but
Well, in
yeah,
some
yeah.
cases.
um, let's talk about community a little bit and how does community play a role in your prepping? You're suburban. Do you have neighbors who prep? Are you part of a community? Just what does that look like?
Yeah, I feel like I'm consistently trying to build that network and that community. I'm in the space right now where just creating awareness is, I feel like the effects of that are creating a community. So I'll be honest, when I first started, I made a completely separate Instagram for my prep stuff that I had just accumulated over the years. I'm like, I'm sure someone could use this because when I first made my post, it was during fire season of 2019, I think, or 20. The years have just really blended together. Um, but I had made a post around it was fire season for us here in the West Coast. And it caught attention of like the people in my inner circle. So my colleagues and my friends, and it kind of just went from there. And I feel like I have a good amount of people that are near me that are on board. Maybe they're not as into like the casual preparedness and prepping along the way as I am, but we have so many conversations all the time. I'll go outside sometimes and I'll say hi to my neighbors that kind of have been following this prep journey of mine, and they'll ask me, say, "Hey, I was thinking about this, getting this for the family, or a brookie, or like how are ammo prices?" So conversation topics just happen to, really gravitate to the things I'm familiar with in my prep journey. So building community is super important. I feel like there's not too many people that have taken preparedness and that prepping journey serious in my immediate area, just because I mean, I came from living in the Bay Area, big, dense city, and I'll tell you, no one's prepping really in my circle that I knew then. But the more you just have conversations, just very matter of fact conversations about, hey, if the power goes out, like, do you have a way to like keep your fridge, cool, and your freezer, or hey, if you like do you know what meals you could cook on the grill so you don't, have to rely on DoorDash? So having just very open conversations about backup plans and their readiness, I think have really helped people come to the same conclusion I did a few years ago, that like I don't have much to say, hey, I'm ready or prepped. I don't even have like, you know, water. Like, what would I do? And some people don't even think to turn on the tub and fill the tub if they have a fear of water is gonna, run out, or the pipes are gonna burst or something. I remember when I first came across that tip, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like life changing. These are gallons and gallons of water that I could store in my tub that I already have that I didn't even think about. So I think creating a community is vital, and spreading that awareness, because the whole purpose, I feel like I started this journey along for my own family, was to change the narrative of what prepping is. Because I feel like when people think, oh, you're a prepper, they think I have like some bunker in my backyard. I'm like, I wish it's not big enough.
You'd
But
have storage
I
then.
know it. I finally have my storage. Dang, I should really start digging. Or they think that you just have this, just hole in the mountain where you're going to coop up. And that is so far from, I'm sure those people exist, but it's so far from the vast majority of people who are just taking extra steps to be prepared. I think I wrote a post on this. We buy insurances, we buy extended warranties, we buy all these risk, ways to mitigate risk. Why is prepping not thought of in that way?
Mm.
So it's kind of just changing. I feel like the work that we're seeing with women who prep and families who prep is really changing the narrative of what preparedness and readiness looks like. And that's an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you mentioned your Instagram account, and that you started that in 2020. Can you tell us more about just your passion for sharing that with others?
Yeah. I feel like I was so, when I would search for things to, include in my bug out bag or ways to preserve food. I somehow I always like started on either Pinterest or Instagram. But as I was learning these things, I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Like I came across some random list of what to throw in my car for a car kit before I really like dove into the prepper community. And I feel like this was so helpful for me. If I can share what I'm doing and encourage one other family or one other person to think, to just stop and think about like if things happen and you're in your car and you don't have any of this stuff, like what's that going to be like? So if I could, just try to get one person to think about readiness and preparedness a little differently, then I'll feel like I've contributed in a positive way, and it
Mhm.
continues to be something that I'm passionate about. Like I'm just here. I see this quote at work. I'm like, I just work here, but I'm just here to try to share what I'm doing to encourage people to maybe just think about this, forward thinking, and be prepared, because feel very junior still in my prepping journey, and a lot of what I've learned and adopted, I've learned from other people, and I love that about this community is we're all here to help other people succeed and thrive, and we want to see that. It's not like this competition. Well, I have the most beef jerky in my town. Like nobody's saying that. Everybody is just trying to make sure that their neighbor is taking steps to be ready and more self-reliant, in the absolute worst case scenario that something does happen.
Listeners, for those of you who are maybe unsure of what does means when she keeps saying this women who prep community, right now, the day that we are recording this podcast, it is September and it is National Preparedness Month. And there is a group of women who prep on Instagram that have banded together with the hashtag women who prep. And we are just encouraging people to post and share their tips. And we are posting daily posts on specific topics for women who prep. But for this past month, it has just been beautiful watching all of the women interact and learn and share and encourage one another. So that is what she means if you are not on Instagram or don't know what she's talking about.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's so hard doing this because, some people are podcast only and some people are Instagram only and some people do both. And um, I love your Instagram. I don't remember when I found it, but
Oh,
you
thank
were
you.
you were just hilarious. So talk a little bit about the impact being a prepper has had on your life.
Um, yeah. I feel like in the beginning I got a lot of crazy questions and looks, and I I was just like, well, I don't care. So I'm gonna do this for my family. Your looks don't pay my bills, so I'm really not interested in the negative opinions of people who think that I might be going overboard with it. And so, but what's interesting though, and tell me if you've experienced this. When I started this journey, this continued journey, and looking for tips and ways to get prepared and stay prepared, the some of the negative questions or people saying like you're wasting your time quickly quickly turned into, well, you know what's in your bug out bag, like, can you help me? And, well, what's the difference between life straw and brita? I'm like, ah, I've piqued your interest. So it's really evolved. And not to say that any person on their prepping journey is like not open to questions or involving other people, but I feel like it has impacted my relationships moreover in such a positive way. I do get a lot of questions from people in my immediate circle that, specifically around questions like home security. One of the things I'm super, super passionate about is women taking their safety and security into their own hands and really taking
Mhm.
steps to be, to know like situational awareness and to really look for things and to be aware of their surroundings. That I have daughters, so let me just preface that, and I'm a woman, so I feel like my perspective is very unique, and that drives on my passion about women just being very responsible for their security and feeling empowered to do so. So I get a lot of questions around, just ways to be more personally secure, but also prepping for, bug out bags and things like that. It's really impacted my friendships and my relationships in a positive way where I can just be the catalyst for these conversations that are happening around readiness and security and that personal responsibility for you and your family. So it's been great.
Yeah, we actually did not share with anyone that we were preppers until we moved. And now, so anyone who knows us personally that now knows because, like, maybe they were friends with me on Facebook and now they follow me on Instagram. We don't live in the same state
Mm,
anymore. So, I have not had that same experience, but only because when we lived in Washington, we kept it very well hidden.
mhm.
Um, so yeah. Let's talk about your prepping journey and what do you feel that you did well? What do you feel you would do different? Just in the beginning when you were starting out.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I would have organized my food preps a little better because now I'm in the now my kind of process is I'm trying to revamp what I have. And so I think it would have
Mhm.
just been easier to say like, okay, layers. Here we go. Instead of let me, I'll be honest. I was part of that panic buying for some things. Did not do toilet paper. Let me just make that very clear. Uh, or paper towels, but I bought a few, cases of spam and stuff. So in looking back now, I would have honestly I would have started earlier and
Mhm.
I would have built these good habits in the beginning. But hindsight's always 2020, and a lot of
Yeah.
what I've learned has really helped change my perspective and the lens of how I'm looking at my preps, and it's all been positive. But besides how I would strategically plan my food preps, I think I would have planned the space of how I'm storing these a little bit better. Because I know I mentioned I kind of just put everything in the garage because that's the space that we had. And I feel like if I'd done just a little bit more, research into what that's going to look like through the seasons in the West, I would have quickly learned that it gets to be 120 in some of these spaces. So I probably would have just planned where I'm storing these a lot better. It would have probably saved me some time and some money, but luckily, we're still able to eat, the food and we can rearrange things in the house. It's just more of an effort now than maybe it could have saved me that time.
You bring up kind of an important topic, at least in my opinion. A lot of people get kind of frozen in the beginning and they're just like overwhelmed and they don't know what to do and they want to just come up with a plan, 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 plan. And
Mhm.
I am a planner and it sounds like you are a planner
Yes.
and we can probably plan the crap out of anything.
Mhm.
Um, what do you say to someone who is in that overwhelmed and frozen, what do I do state?
Yeah, that's a big one because I feel like that impacts everybody. I've had those times too.
Mhm.
And I think what you're describing is the analysis. I'm sorry, analysis paralysis. There we go, where you're like just so in the thick of planning, and it's kind of this tall order, and it's kind of intimidating, and you're just like stuck. You're frozen. So it's easier
Mhm.
to just not do anything. I I felt like that in the beginning too, because it's overwhelming, right? You think of like, you see all the natural disasters that are happening. You see what was unfolding in 2020 in different parts of our country. You still see the ramifications today of a broken logistics system in, like, for example, with our grocery stores. So all of that is out there and it's overwhelming. So I would say to anybody that kind of feels like they're in that space is just to start small, because all of these great accomplishments in prepping, they really are an accumulation of smaller steps that have been taken. What I mean by that is, take a look at what you do have in your house already. Do you have, older bags or backpacks that your kids don't use anymore? Do you have a jacket that you don't really wear anymore and don't like? Could that be in your bug out bag as your jacket and your clothing items in there? So take a look at what you have and start small and have these conversations as a family. I think it's even harder to do if it's one person, like a
Mhm.
dedicated prepper in the family that's taken on this weight and responsibility for everybody in the family. It truly should be um, a family conversation, because not only is the buy-in stronger that way, but so is the shared interest and responsibility. So I think if you break it down to smaller tasks and smaller things that you can incorporate into your, daily life or weekly grocery run, that'll give you that'll kind of relieve a lot of this weight of like, I've got to get prepped now. And, it'll get you one step closer to where you want to be. I knew somebody who kind of wanted to start this journey and it just felt very, very daunting. And, um, the sheer practice of, picking up an extra thing of canned goods or rice, or taking her running shoes that she doesn't want anymore but are still really good and putting that in a go bag, already is getting you closer to where you want to be. So starting small.
That is so important. And, like you mentioned earlier, that you are currently revamping and changing your system. I
Hmm.
think that is huge because a lot of times we make these plans and then it's not working, but we feel stuck in it. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that you may go into something with the grandest plan possible, but if it doesn't work for your space or your house or what you are doing, you need a new plan.
Hmm.
And I think prepping just needs to be this fluid thing because our lives change all the time and our plan needs to change with that.
Yeah, that is so critical. I feel like a lot of people, there used to be an infomercial, I think it was like a toaster oven, where it's like, set it and forget it, and like that's not how this works. It's not, because and it's super easy for people that are getting into this, and starting this prep journey to feel that way. They're like, I bought 68 cans of spam, I'm good, right? Not quite. It is a fluid thing. It is a constantly evolving thing. Um, the natural disaster threats around you may change, right? You may find yourself that you've moved, you're in a different space now. Maybe you had, had another baby. That is completely different than somebody who doesn't have, young children in the house to prep for.
Mhm.
So there's these complexities that come with every situation, and it is highly subjective and so unique to each family and each season that the family is in. So I think it should be a continued conversation at the family level and the community level. But even something as small as, having a conversation about gardening. I know that's another big thing. I started my garden for the first time last year, and it was my this past spring and summer was my first grow season. And I don't think that would have really been possible without the encouragement of my family and also the
Mhm.
community, and really showing the benefits that come with that. And it's a great way to be self-sustaining and to further your prep journey, because guess what? If society collapsed and you suddenly have to grow your own crops, it's not going to go perfect the first grow season. It takes time to know kind of what you're doing, and you could go into it with the best plans and best intentions, and you read every letter on the back of that tiny seed packet and you did it. Guess what? It's not always going to work out the way you think. And that's just gardening. That doesn't, there's the whole thing of prepping that is such a continual learning journey that you have to account for. So the fluidity of this journey and the is so spot on. I'm so glad you brought that up.
You were just doing amazing, and all of your answers bring up like another concept, and this is great. I don't have to do any work because you're doing it all for me.
I'm paid by the word. So
So you just talked about skills. And I know a lot of people think about prepping and they think about, oh, prepping is stuff, and I need to buy stuff, and I need to buy food, and I need to buy the stuff for my bug out bag, and I need to buy ammo. Um, I don't believe that. What do you believe just in regards to prepping and the culture of prepping and mindset and skills?
yeah, that's a big one. I will say the first couple weeks and months that I really started to get serious about prepping, it felt like, why am I buying all this stuff? I'm buying a lot of stuff. I'm buying a lot of food. I'm buying a lot of things. And, not to discount that you want to have the right tools for the right job, right? So you want a bug out bag that's going to serve you best and your family member best. And that takes time, that takes effort, and it takes, many cases a financial investment. It doesn't have to be $1 million if you know how to plan it and you're leaning on the community for some tips and guidance there. But it initially felt like a lot of stuff, and I think that uh, is very like a common thought. But it really has to do a lot with knowledge and skills and practice, and that is something that is honed over time. Um, one being, gardening. I know I just brought it up, but gardening is such a skill that, you see people post their very lush gardens on Instagram and like, wow, this just happened overnight. No, what you don't know is these people have been tending to their garden day and night and pest control and the right soil and also understanding what growing zone that they're in and knowing what to grow for their family. So there's a lot of effort that goes into these skill building activities. I know some amazing, women are doing like archery, and I'm like, that is awesome. I wouldn't even know where to start. Um, that's something I want to do. And everybody starts at like this base level of their knowledge of things and this skill building. Nobody is like born with like amazing archery skills and like the greenest thumb. Nobody starts there. But you have communities to lean on to help you get there, which is great. But a lot of this is you could have, gosh, let's think of it this way. You could have ammunition and a firearm, but if you don't know how to safely operate and responsibly use your firearm, you are just as much as a danger.
Mhm.
So, you have to really take full responsibility for these skills that you want to develop and hone, because when you are in the situation where you're going to lean on that, it's just you, right? If, for example, with archery, if you don't know how to use your bow, and you're in a situation where your family needs to eat. I mean, this is like a wild situation, I'm sure, but like let's say you need to find food, that's going to be your best bet to get, you know, dinner to your family. So the skills development is completely underrated. I know it feels like a lot of buying stuff in the beginning. I would encourage to make sure you have the things that you need along your prep journey, but don't don't sleep on the skills building, because that's what's really going to help you thrive and survive in some of these situations.
Fun question. What has been like your most fun skill that you've learned
Ah, fun skill.
or exciting or whatever?
I know. I'm like, what's exciting in my suburban life? Let me think. Um, you know, n- there's two that have been really helpful for me. One is firearms training. Um, it just is so empowering. Oh my goodness. If I can afford to get into the range with ammo in the way it is sometimes, it's just I feel like I am so empowered to own the responsibility of my security, right? Because I feel like so many people um, can fear the firearm, and it's a tool. And the worst thing I would, the worst situation I can think of is having to need to use your firearm, unfortunately, and not feeling confident to do so.
Mhm.
So that is one firearms training, which again is continued practice, continued education is that's paramount. And I think the other thing that has been, so eye-opening for me and interesting has been gardening. Of course, I couldn't find beds that fit the size I want and the height, so I had to build them. So that was one. I was like, wow, this is hard. And then on top of it, being able to really watch something grow from like a seed to a seedling and to see the plant mature and to pour your love into it
Mhm.
and weeks of water for one tomato, so it's like a it's a labor of love, but I'll tell you, I ate that tomato and it was fantastic, and I made sure everybody in my family tried it because I was like, "I made this. We made this, guys. We have to really enjoy this." So, being in the garden has been so, helpful for me to really have an appreciation for food and those that have really got it down for self-reliance and have a garden, and just great appreciation for the agriculture industry that's in place today to just put food on our table because it's not easy, guys. It's not. And I know you're constantly in your
Mhm.
garden and you have to deal with
Mhm.
wild things like frost. We're over here on the West Coast. We're like, what's frost? So it's just, it's wild, but it's been very meditative for me too. So when,
Mhm.
I know you mentioned in the opening, I work full time. I'm a full time student. I'm a mom. I live on coffee. And so sometimes to turn my brain off because some things are the world's overwhelming sometimes. I'll go into the garden and there's a no phones policy when I'm out there and just being with the plants, watering the plants and that's so serene and healing in ways that I didn't even anticipate when I like started gardening.
Yay for gardening. I'm so
Yay.
excited. I don't have to worry about no phone in the garden because as soon as, like, I get away from my house, I don't have enough service, so
Oh my goodness.
that's why
It's built in.
I'm never doing lives or anything in the garden because I don't have enough service to do it. Um, you just talked again about, that you work full time and you're a student. How do you, find enough time for mom, employee, student, and prepping?
I think it just goes back to being able to have the conversation with your family about what's important. What are our priorities? And I think a lot of the actions and habits are dictated by that. So if you make prepping part of that priority list, it just naturally becomes part of your daily and your weekly to do, right? So when we go grocery shopping as a family, I know extra things I need to get for what layer. If we want to do, a pizza night at home, I'll challenge our family to try to make this out of things that we already have in our prep layers, right? In our food layers. See, like, can we do this if we didn't have what we needed? And
Mhm.
so it takes a lot of conscious decision making to say like I'm going to split up, I'm going to, as far as time management, I'm going to plan things so that we can make sure we are on top of what we need to do for our preps or skills building or just learning about different things that would prove useful if we suddenly didn't have power or heat or water. So I think it just takes intentional decisions, but they all start with conversations on the family level. And it really has to be it would be easier if it was a joint effort. I'm sure there's people out there who are kind of feeling like they're pulling the weight for the entire family because not everybody's on board. But I feel like as you kind of share how this would be beneficial, like let's say you invest in a Berkey, right? Okay. There are places in our own country where there's not clean water coming out of those pipes. What would you do? So I think just kind of illuminating the fact that this is kind of the world we live in right now and how do we better prepare ourselves for that today, I think that will create buy-in, for those who feel like maybe family members aren't quite on board.
Hmm.
Not to send a PSA out there, I'm sorry, but it's just that has been my journey. You're not here. I don't feel like I don't have the experience where I've had to like really bend somebody's arm to convince them to really start thinking about preparedness. I think that actually just it happened by itself because you're pulling out the facts of the world and you're putting it in front of them and you're saying, here's
Mhm.
what's happening. Here are ways for us to become more prepared and less reliant on convenience items. What do you want to do? I mean, the choice is pretty obvious from there.
Mhm. Mhm. You may not have an answer to this, but what would you say or how would you encourage someone who, does that and their husband still is not on board?
That's a great question because I feel like the driver of that disconnect is so much deeper than just prepping. Because I think that also, like, let's say I've come across a few people have reached out to me where they just have completely different schools of thought on spending versus savings. And I know you've talked about this too, where like your food storage is a savings account, right?
Mhm.
Let's just look at how much the price of vegetables and meat has really gone up over time. Not to mention the scarcity. So I feel like you can do what you can. If you know you have to obviously, buy um, a water filter, maybe pick the one that can serve more purposes than just, one that is only a singular in purpose. And I'm thinking more of like some of the water filters that require electricity that are maybe
Mhm.
just as expensive as a Berkey. And I keep going to Berkey because I feel like that's like the rite of passage for every prepper. Great, you brought a Berkey, you're in, so but I mean, that's kind of just one example, but it really I feel like the families or the people that might have disconnect with their partners or other family members on this topic, I think it's maybe a gap of um, really just trying to communicate the reasons why this should be a conversation because every time that I've encouraged maybe a peer or a friend to just have an open discussion about planning because again I view it as insurance, I view it as warranties, and that's not a dirty word in today's, but somehow prepping is sometimes, so
Mhm.
if you force yourself to look at it in this lens, it kind of destigmatizes that whole prepper thing, and it helps you realize, okay, maybe there's ways for us to just like make sure we have like matches and candles and stuff, right? So my best advice is just to continue to hold space for these open conversations around prepping and self-reliance so that the information can kind of the benefits will convince the people who really see the value in it. I don't think you
Mhm.
really when in terms of prepping and self-reliance, I don't think it should really have to be a push come to shove type of conversation or urging somebody to get on board. It should really be super evident as you plan for your family. And maybe that's my perspective, but you know, uh, everybody's journey and situation is completely different.
Mhm. That is so true. We all get to make our own choices and our own decisions and choose what prepping looks like for us.
Hmm.
Um, so I only know you online. I do not know you in person. What do I not know enough about you to ask?
Oh gosh. Well, first I get paid by the word, so there's there's that. Um, I I feel like I completely a different person than I was in my early 20s because when I was, working in the Bay Area, working in a predominantly male industry, I think there was, you know, I see a lot of women attacking other women and toxicity online, and I think that's evident in a lot of things. And I shudder because that used to be something I did. Ugh, I know, but going
We still
now
love you. It's
I
okay.
know. I'm like, "Oh, who is this person?" I think something you don't like that most people don't know is I've gone through this personal transformation over the years because what I used to just completely live this very superficial life, right? Defined by material things, just such a people pleaser, such a person that wanted to be accepted, and that was, super important to me. And I think as through time I've really grown to view life through a different lens. And maybe that's a part of moving completely out of that environment or becoming a mother or really just having the time to reflect. But, I feel like we rise by lifting others. And so I'm so proud of the work that the community has done and this effort around women who prep because I feel like so many mothers, women, in general have been thinking about how to become more prepared, how to take their security, and make that their responsibility and feel more empowered. I feel like this is such a time of awakening for so many people and women especially because I think we've kind of all seen the writing on the wall where 2020 threw us all for a loop and we really realized how fragile things like the logistics system is um, it just opened a lot of eyes. And the reason I started with saying, like, I used to be this person is because now I see how unnecessary that type of behavior is. Because when women are empowering other women, it's such a beautiful thing because, working
Hmm.
in a male dominated industry, there's already, there's already a lot stacked against women in their climb to, self-awareness or career or ambition, you name it. There's already a lot. We don't need more reasons to feel inadequate about our journey. Meaning like we don't like it always makes me sad sometimes when I see, some other women saying, "Well, you're not doing this right." It's like we already have enough of that negativity. Why don't we focus on ways to uplift each other and empower each other? And even if, your perspective's different than mine and vice versa, it's we're still there's still commonality to lift each other up, and try to see that in a positive light. So that transformation has been so helpful for me because now I just feel like it's completely like a giving back effort. Anytime I try to share information that I have found helpful, or if I learn something from somebody else, I'm like, hey, this was a cool tip that I learned. Here it is. So that journey has been so great for me on a personal level. And I love seeing that really just amplified so much more in, what's going on with women who prep and just that whole journey.
And that's it. Podcast is done because you just said it all right there.
Sorry.
Like I'm just sitting here getting all mushy. I'm like, oh,
Uh,
yes, I agree. Oh, we just have a couple minutes left. So why don't you and thank you so much. I know that I don't know if that was super comfortable for you to share that, but I think a lot of women are going to relate to that because a lot of us have been there, in our younger years or are still there. And I just really appreciate your vulnerability in that. So thank you.
yeah.
Um, why don't you share where people can find you online if they have questions or they just want to find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah. I live online on Instagram. My handle is MuthaPrepper. So it's MuthaPrepper. And sorry, I was like, spelling, it's hard. Uh, I would love to say that I have a YouTube, and I do, but I don't because I'm not great at YouTube. So I'm sorry. Instagram is what I'm familiar with. I will try better at YouTube, but I'm on Instagram primarily.
Awesome. Well, everyone, you can go find her there. And I feel like a rapper when I say your name, like Mother Prepper.
I, you know, um, hey, that's really good. Can you do it again? I'm just kidding.
No.
Um, I, it's kind of, oh geez, it's kind of an inside joke, I guess, because the people that know me in real life, I talk like a sailor. I'm sorry, I can't help it. So I'm just what you hear is kind of what you get. So I'm very much like this in real life. It's consistent, goofy. I say bad words. And so I'm also, child of the 90s when like rap
Mm-hmm.
was up and coming. So it's definitely been a huge part of my background, and this is just more of my personality. So when I when I chose Mother Prepper, I'm like, oh, perfect. The people that know me know that is very much in line with how I talk every day.
That's
So there's
awesome.
that.
Okay, favorite rapper.
Awesome. My goodness, thanks.
I'm serious. Spill it.
Oh, I can't. There's so many. There's so many.
No, you have
Okay.
to pick one.
Okay. For me, Tupac. I mean, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
me too.
Oh my
Yay!
gosh. I'm so impressed.
I love
It's
Tupac. We're
it's
so old.
he's alive, right? He keeps whispering. No, I'm just kidding. I was gonna say he
I
keeps
was so
bringing out stuff.
sad. I remember, like, yeah, anyway. Okay.
I'm so impressed, and I feel so much closer to you. Absolutely.
People like I think people have a mental picture of me that is not at all who I am. And so when I like roll up somewhere in my minivan and I
With
got my rap
cock.
blaring, they're like, "What is this?"
Oh
Like, this
man.
is me.
You are dynamic, you are multifaceted. So they'll just need to catch up.
Yeah. Just one more question and then we'll close. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I just want to encourage people to really reach out if there's questions. I feel like it's easier said than done. People might feel like they want to start this self-prepared journey and don't know where to start. And I'm telling you, one of the best things about prepping is having the prepping community available, because they all want to see you thrive. We all want to see you like do amazing things. So just to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Des, so much for joining us today. And listeners, thank you for listening and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. And until next time, remember every little thing matters and a goal without a plan is just a wish. If you have any questions, feel free and find me on Instagram at This Prepared Life. You can also visit thispreparedlife.blogspot.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you would leave a review on Apple Podcasts.